Today we are going to be introduced to the midpoint formula. We discussed the term midpoint back when we were talking about the midpoint of diagonals, when we were talking about diagonals bisecting each other in our parallelogram proofs. So you could go back and remind yourself of those things that will be coming back in this topic. But here, when we have a horizontal segment like this, it's easy to find the middle. Here you see from A to this point is 3 units, and from the midpoint to B is 3 units. So kind of doing it by eye, but checking that it actually is the midpoint, and then I can get the coordinates are 4, 4. After I go through this, we're going to be discussing the midpoint formula. How could I just go from the coordinates that the x coordinates are 1 and 7, get the x coordinate of the midpoint? Well, 4 is just the average of the 1 and the 7, the two x coordinates. Then, if I look at the two y coordinates, 4 and 4, add them together, divide by 2, get their average, and it's 4. So the midpoint is basically the average of the x coordinates and the average of the y coordinates for that segment. But again, when it's horizontal or vertical, you could kind of just see it. Here, I'd be able to see that's the midpoint because there's 2 units from one endpoint to the midpoint and 2 units from the other. So the coordinates there are 3, -1. And again, you could look that the x coordinates, 3 and 3 average to 3, and the y coordinates 1 and -3 add to -2 divided by 2 is -1. So the coordinates of the midpoint are the average of the x coordinate and the average of the y coordinate. When we have a skewed line like here, again, I could kind of do it by eye and then see that this would be down 3, right 3, down 3, right 3, which would prove that that's the middle. So that would be 1, 0. And again, the x coordinates, -2 plus 4 is 2 divided by 2 is 2. And the y coordinates, 3 plus -3 is 0 divided by 2 is 0. So the midpoint can be seen graphically in some cases, but you could always use this midpoint formula, which is finding the average of the x coordinates, average of the y coordinates. So we write it as x1 plus x2 divided by 2, comma, y1 plus y2 divided by 2. So you just write it as an ordered pair when you plug in. So we'll practice this one with just, instead of using the eye, getting the averages of the coordinates. So the average of the x coordinates would look like this. I'll open the parentheses and put -5 plus 3 divided by 2, comma. Now let's get the y coordinates, 2 and -2. And I'd add them, 2 plus -2 divided by 2, and then simplify. -5 plus 3 is -2. -2 divided by 2 is -1. 2 plus -2 is 0. 0 divided by 2 is 0. So there's our midpoint, -1, 0. And if you plot it here, you could see that it makes sense. The next two, no graph was supplied for you, so you're just strictly relying on the formula. So I'm just going to do my highlighting all together. My x coordinates, one color for the two problems. My y coordinates, another color. And now to begin. To get the x coordinate of the midpoint, I'd add the x coordinates, divide by 2. And the y coordinates, add the y coordinates, divide by 2. So first, combining the top, I would get -11 divided by 2 is going to be -5.5. So it's not always going to be integer coordinates. And then you have 7 over 2, which is 3.5. Or, of course, you could just keep it -11. Or I could write it as -11 over 2, comma 7 over 2. Either way, it would be seen in multiple choice. If it's short answer, you could write your answer either of these ways. And again, for the next one, the x-coordinate's going to be 11 plus negative 3 divided by 2, comma negative 10 plus 9 divided by 2. Add the tops first, or you could just plug it into the calculator. 11 minus 3 is 8. 8 divided by 2 is 4. And then negative 10 plus 9 is negative 1. So negative 1 divided by 2, or negative 0.5. So either way, that would be your final answer. So these examples all gave you the two midpoints the two endpoints and asked for the midpoint of a segment. The next example is when you have to find an endpoint. So in example 1, they gave you the endpoint 2, 5. So I'm going to graph that. We'll do the first one graphically. 2, 5. That's an endpoint, so let's call it A. The midpoint is 5, 1. You can call that M. And it's asking you to find the other midpoint. So any ideas of how you would do that? Now I would never count the distance from A to M using a diagonal line. So even though that would be part of the line segment, I would count that I went down 4, right 3. So down 4, right 3. So then I'm going to go down 4 again, right 3. So down 4, right 3, down 4, right 3. And then that's going to give me my other endpoint, B, which has the coordinates 8, negative 3. Okay. And you could check that the averages of the x-coordinates 2 and 8. 2 plus 8 gives you 10 divided by 2 is 5, so that checks out. The y-coordinates 5 and negative 3 add to 2 divided by 1 is 1. So you could use that kind of to check, but your final answer is that the other endpoint is 8, negative 3. So with one of these questions, you want to be careful that your answer isn't between the 2 points, since the midpoint should always be the one in the middle of the endpoints. Now, if you're given another example without graph paper, you could find a piece of graph paper to use. Okay, so I suggest when you do your Google form, seeing if you could keep this open on the side, you could do scrap work right on here, there's room, and you could use these graphs. So here they gave you, there's an endpoint, so let's call this x1 and y1, and here's the midpoint. And we need to find basically x2, y2 is your question mark, your other endpoint. So algebraically, we could set it up as x1 is 3 plus whatever the x2 would be divided by 2. We would want to equal to the x-coordinate of the midpoint, negative 2. So how would I solve this? Put the negative 2 over 1 and cross multiply. So 3 plus x2 would equal 2 times negative 2, which is negative 4. Subtract 3 on both sides. And my x-coordinate of the second midpoint is going to be negative 7. Then let's do the same thing for the y's. The y-coordinate of the first point is 10. Plus the y-coordinate of the unknown is y2 divided by 2. The midpoint has a y-coordinate of 3. So again, I could put the 3 over 1, cross multiply, get 10 plus y2 equals the 3 times 2, which is 6. Then I could minus 10 from both sides and get that y2 equals negative 4. Making the coordinates of the endpoint negative 7, negative 4. I could check. 3 plus negative 7 is negative 4. Divided by 2 would give you the negative 2. 10 plus negative 4 is negative 6. Sorry, positive 6 divided by 2 is 3. So that shows you that these are the coordinates of the endpoint. You could have also just utilized the graph above and seeing, okay, the first endpoint's 310, so feel free to do it that way also. 3 comma 10 is right here. That's our A. The midpoint is negative 2, 3 right here. Midpoint. And then going from A to the M would be down from 10 to 3. That's down 7. Left 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Left 5. So to get to the other endpoint, I'd have to go down 7, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Left 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Bringing me to negative 7, negative 4, which is what we got as our answer. So that, again, would make a line segment with M being in the middle. Okay, hope this helped. Please text me on Remind if you need help. Tomorrow will be our live class. I think 8:15 I wrote, whatever time I had written, because we are going to be adding to this. So make sure you understand midpoint going into tomorrow.